In the aftermath of a crime or a bizarre event, we're often left with more questions than answers. Sometimes we get those answers, but other times we're left to ponder and attempt to piece together the truth. Number 5. The mystery of the Istal woman has haunted investigators and web sleuths alike for over 5 decades, and with the passage of time, it seems we're no closer to uncovering the truth. The story of the Istal woman begins on November 29, 1970, when hikers in Norway came across the charred remains of a woman. Horrified at what they had come across, the hikers went straight into town to notify the local police. Upon arriving at the scene, police noticed that the woman was in an odd position, laid on her back with her legs stretched out, and her hands clenched tightly against her body, almost as if someone had positioned her like that. Although her remains were charred, investigators failed to find a campfire or other source of fire that may have contributed to her demise, only adding another layer of complexity to the case. As her remains were unrecognizable, police were unable to make an identification, and she was given the name the Istal woman. Police hoped that perhaps her personal belongings would hold some clues as to her identity, but sadly there were no documents found. Police noted that her personal belongings had bizarrely not been affected by the fire, and close to her body, they found a bottle of liquor, 2 water bottles made of plastic, rubber boots, a jumper, an umbrella, a watch, 2 earrings, a ring, and a scarf. With little information to work with, police wondered if the labels from the clothing items found near the woman would provide them with any clues. In a bizarre twist of events, all of the labels and identifying markings had been removed from her jewelry and clothing, making it impossible to determine the brand or country where the clothes had originated from. Whoever had done this had been extremely thorough in making sure she could not be identified. The woman had also been found lying on a bed of paper, and a fur hat had been placed under her body. Both the paper and the hat were found to have traces of gasoline. However, much like the rest of her belongings, the labels and identifying information had been removed. Things only became weirder when 3 days later, 2 suitcases were found at a train station. After an investigation, police determined that these had belonged to the mysterious woman and set about analyzing them. Inside, they found clothing, wigs, makeup, 135 Norwegian dollars, along with currency from the UK, Belgium, and Switzerland. They also found 100 Deutsche Marks inside the lining of one of the suitcases, indicating that the woman had been traveling around Central Europe before her passing. They also found glasses, sunglasses, shoes, and some additional clothing. Much like every other item that had belonged to the woman, all of the labels and identifying information had been removed from them, making it impossible to figure out where they had originated from. The fact that all of this information had been scrubbed from her belongings led many people to believe that the woman was a spy who'd been conducting top-secret missions only to be intercepted by the enemy and taken care of. Also inside the suitcase, they found a notebook which contained dates and places that the mysterious woman had visited. When checking official records, they found that the woman had used at least 8 different passports, complete with different aliases, but had always listed herself as being from Belgium. Witnesses placed the mysterious woman at a hotel in Norway, and employees of the hotel confirmed that a woman matching her description had been staying there. They described her as 25 to 40 years old, 5'4" to 5'5", with brown hair and brown eyes. Isotope testing has revealed that the woman spent the first 5 years of her life in France and Germany. However, she later moved out west when she was older. Unless new evidence comes to light, or the right person comes forward, We may never know the true identity of the woman and what happened to her. If you have any information, you're asked to contact Interpol. Number 4. In March of 1952, archaeologists were searching through caves in Qumran National Park in Israel when they came across ancient scrolls. These scrolls were written on parchment or papyrus, but the last scroll, numbered 3Q15, was different. Scroll 3Q15 was found in Cave 3, hence the name 3Q15. It was different because instead of being written on parchment, it was copper. Archaeologists examined the scroll and determined that the scroll was 99% copper and 1% tin. As the scroll was made out of metal, the archaeologist had a hard time transporting the scroll out of the cave. They couldn't roll it up like you would a piece of paper, and instead they had to cut it into sections and glue it back together when they'd successfully gotten it out of the cave. The scroll also differed from the others found in Cave 3, as it was written in Hebrew and detailed a list of 64 locations of hidden treasure. Archaeologists were ecstatic with their discovery and quickly set their sights on finding these locations. The total value of the treasure mentioned on the copper scroll is thought to be at least $1 billion. The archaeologists soon ran into a problem though. They had no idea where the treasure was buried. One point from the copper scroll reads, quote, "In the salt pit that is under the steps, 41 talents of silver. In the cave of the old washer's chamber, on the third terrace, 65 pieces of gold." The copper scroll didn't mention the location or give coordinates, and experts spent months trying to decipher the writings. For decades, archaeologists and explorers have tried their best to uncover the location of the hidden treasures, but have failed to do so. Many have found themselves going around in circles or venturing into areas that would require government permission. As no one else has been able to find the treasures, many have questioned whether they really exist at all. Some experts argue that it's impossible for the treasure to exist due to the number of valuable metals that have been hidden. The question remains, do the copper scroll treasures really exist? And if so, where are they? Number 3. In 1996, the crew of the acclaimed film Titanic were struck down with the bizarre case of food poisoning that could have proved fatal. On August 8, 1996, James Cameron and the crew behind the blockbuster film were getting ready for their last day at the Nova Scotia film set. The crew started filming just as the sun went down. Filming went well into the night until the sun began to rise again. Because of this, their routine had been completely turned upside down, and their main meal was served at midnight. On this occasion, the crew took their break at midnight as normal, and sat down to eat clam chowder, accompanied with other delicious treats to celebrate the last night of filming in Canada. Toasts and celebrations continued into the meal, and soon it was time for the crew to get back to filming and wrap up their 5 weeks of hard work. Those who were on the set commented how good the clam chowder was, and that pretty much every crew member was lining up for another serving. After the crew had finished their meal and returned to the set, that's when things turned deadly. The crew were overcome with sickness, while others uncontrollably laughed and cried. As minutes passed, the chaos continued, and crew members were passing out or slumped over tables in a state of delirium. James Cameron even told First Post, quote, "I recall being stabbed in the face with a pin by a crew member. I'm sitting there, bleeding and laughing, watching helplessly as my crew fell apart. Thankfully, some of the members of the crew hadn't consumed the chowder, and they ushered everyone into vans and rushed them to a nearby hospital, thinking that everyone had suffered an allergic reaction or had been poisoned." Staff at the hospital were overwhelmed and worked to contain the situation, providing the crew members with fluids and running tests to find out exactly what they were dealing with. Their worst fears were confirmed when the tests revealed the clam chowder had been spiked with PCP. This is a hallucinogenic substance that makes users feel like they're floating and can alter perceptions of reality. The substance can sometimes trigger psychotic outbursts, leading users to become physically violent. Luckily for the crew of the Titanic, no one suffered any adverse side effects, and Cameron's wound was fine. An investigation was opened to try and discover how the food could have been spiked, and to find the person responsible. The main concern wasn't with the substance itself, but the fact that the food had been spiked at all and could have proven fatal had a different substance been used. After 4 years, the investigation was dropped due to a lack of evidence, with James Cameron and the crew being thankful that a more harmful substance wasn't used. Number 2. In 1942, the city of Pascagoula, Mississippi, was caught in the grips of one of the creepiest and most bizarre crime sprees in the history of the state. In early 1942, the Greenville News ran a story about Mary Evelyn Bridges, who had awoken one night to find a man standing in the bedroom that she shared with Edna Marie Heidel. As she awoke, she noticed the man had cut off locks of their hair. She told the newspaper, quote, "I saw the figure of kinda a short fat man bending over me with something shiny in his hand, and he was fooling with my hair. When he saw me open my eyes, he said shush. I yelled and he jumped out of the window." Hoping that this was a bizarre one-off occurrence, the residents of Pascagoula put the event to the back of their minds. That was until 6 days later when the man struck again, sneaking into the home of Mrs. E. Taylor and cutting off a lock of her hair. She told the Tribune newspaper, quote, "I had a vague feeling of something passing over my face, and then I woke up feeling ill." This bizarre behavior earned the intruder the nickname, quote, "the Phantom Barber of Pascagoula," and soon residents were beginning to panic. The Phantom Barber would slice open window screens and sneak into women's homes, cutting off locks of their hair. It was theorized by police that the barber put a soaked rag over his victim's face to subdue them, which might explain why Miss Taylor fell ill after the attack. Then, out of nowhere, the Phantom Barber escalated and his crimes turned violent. In June of 1942, Mr. and Mrs. Heidelberg were sound asleep in their Pascagoula home. At the turn of midnight, they heard an intruder breaking in. With little time to process what was going on, the couple were attacked with an iron rod. The Phantom Barber had struck once again and disappeared into the night. Some sources claim that William Dolan was the Phantom Barber following his arrest later on in 1942. Dolan was arrested after locks of human hair were found near his home, but many have cast doubt on this theory. Dolan was originally from Germany, and with World War II still waging on, residents and police had a good reason to pinpoint him as a scapegoat. Shortly after being arrested, Dolan was released after passing a lie detector test. Although in modern times, we now know that lie detector tests are not a valid investigative tool. The question remains, who was the real Phantom Barber of Pascagoula? Number 1. In 2015, 32-year-old Henry McCabe mysteriously vanished after spending the evening with 2 of his friends, William Kennedy and Calvin Johnson, in Spring Lake Park in Minnesota. They began partying on September 6, 2015, and into the early morning hours of September 7th, and at around 2 a.m., the 2 friends claimed that McCabe asked them to drop him off at a Super America gas station. They found this request odd, as the station he'd been asked to be dropped off at was in Fridley, which was the opposite direction of his home. Nevertheless, they complied, and according to Kennedy and Johnson, McCabe got out of the car and they never saw him again. At 2:28 a.m., McCabe's wife, Corrine, was awoken by a phone call from her husband. At the other end of the phone, she heard McCabe scream down the phone, claiming that someone had shot him. It turns out that McCabe had been trying to call his brother, Tim Barber, but as Tim was asleep, McCabe was forced to leave a voicemail. The full audio clip has never been released, but the audio that we do have is extremely disturbing. In the voicemail message, McCabe is heard moaning and groaning, accompanied by unexplained growling and screaming noises. As the call progresses, there's a moment of silence before a male voice is heard saying "stop it." McCabe's family were extremely distressed by the call and the voicemail message and immediately called the police to report the incident. It wouldn't be until November 2nd, 2015 that McCabe's family would find out what really happened to him. On November 2nd, his body was found in Rush Lake. During their investigation, the local police found that McCabe's phone had last pinged a cell tower in New Brighton, which was only 4 miles away from where his friends had claimed to have dropped him off. Suspicious, police brought in Kennedy and Johnson for further questioning, and after what they described as a miscalculation, they revealed that they dropped him off in Fridley, but as it turned out, they dropped him off in a different location around 2 to 3 miles away, which was confirmed by CCTV footage. But that didn't explain why Kennedy and Johnson had McCabe's keys and wallet on them, since McCabe would have needed both to get home, assuming that he was planning to call a taxi, that is. The discovery of McCabe's body only added to the mystery, as it was revealed that McCabe had died by drowning, the opposite of what he had told his brother on the phone. In fact, the coroner found no evidence of McCabe sustaining any gunshot wounds to any part of his body, and ruled that it was likely an accidental death since McCabe was intoxicated at the time. There are reports that the FBI was involved in McCabe's case. However, they're choosing to remain tight-lipped about their involvement. Any toxicology reports conducted on McCabe are being withheld from the public, and the exact details of what happened to Henry McCabe are still unknown, and the truth behind the haunting voicemail is yet to be uncovered. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.